Oh, I hope each of you had a really good Thanksgiving holiday. And it is good to see so many people here this morning. And we do have a lot of visitors, and we're grateful for each one of you. And I'm really grateful that Burke is back with us today. Now, Zonell did a wonderful job, but this lesson this morning is, to me, very complicated to present, at least in a timely and understandable way. And you know that I like to have us all out of here by 11:15 or so. So it requires a lot of things to be put on the screen this morning. And so, Burke, we're glad that you're back to help with all of this. We're going to be looking at the latter part of Romans chapter 1. And in Romans chapter 1, Paul has been telling us that there is a righteousness of God that is available to all people. And that righteousness that comes from God comes by way of the story, the good news story of His Son Jesus, and by way of our faith. But though it's wonderfully good news, what we know is that most of this world doesn't even want to hear the story of Jesus. And the reason why, apparently, that they don't want to hear the story of Jesus is because, as we have said on so many occasions, if you don't understand that you have a sin problem, and if you don't understand the seriousness of that sin problem, then why would anyone want to hear this story of Jesus? And so Paul is going to be intent in the book of Romans. And actually it's an uncomfortable intention that Paul has, at least uncomfortable for all of us who read this. Intent on trying to describe how that we are all a product of sin, or we are all sinful. He wants to make sure that we understand that so that we can see and delight in the really good news of the story of Jesus Christ. And so I title all this, The List. It's not an all-encompassing list, but it's enough to make us understand that we really do have this very serious sin problem. And Paul has already taught us that the world is a place where people no longer recognize that God is God, that God is the Creator. Though as you look around in all of creation and all of nature, God displays Himself over and over again, and we've talked about that. But even though He displays Himself so plainly for all to see, people just don't see it any longer. And now the list begins with what I will call idolatry. Because what happens is that people begin to exchange worshiping God, and they begin to worship the things that God created for all of us. And I've always had trouble with this word idolatry, because I really don't know where you cross that line. Where you cross the line of loving the things of this world more than you love or desire God. And would I be correct in saying this morning that all of us are in love with our things? Would I be correct? We love our pleasures. We love our leisure. We love our football teams sometimes. I had to bring it up a little bit, okay? just a little bit. And we love our vehicles, and we love our houses, and and where is it that we cross the line so that we know that we love God, we desire God more than we love all these things in this world? And I don't know where that line is. I struggle with it, and likely you also struggle with it. And then after we get past idolatry, we begin to believe all kinds of the lies that Satan tells us. And we find ourselves steeped in sexual impurity. Now, Burke's putting all this on the screen, But I have to have a little cheat sheet because I don't have all these things memorized. But I do know he's going to put up their sexual impurity. Is it not everywhere? It's a thought away. It's a glance away. It's within the grasp of everyone. Just an easy grasp for everyone. And it's called all kinds of different names. Likely the most popular is adultery. But then it's called pornography. Then it's called by terms that represent any kind of sexual activity outside of marriage. And it's called homosexuality. Now, I want you to know this morning, I'm not wanting to be mean or cruel or judgmental toward anyone. Any one of these names is as bad as the other in the sight of God. But Paul will highlight this one phrase where he says the impurity is at the point that men have abandoned their natural desires for women and they are inflamed with lust one toward another, and women do likewise. And I know that we live in a world, an entire world, where most parts of the world are trying to normalize that and make it seem as though it is okay and common, and all I can tell you is that God says every kind of sexual impurity is wrong. And He labels it as sin. As unpopular as that is to say in our world today, that's what Paul says. Now, by the way, as we make our way through the list, the question you have to keep asking yourself is, can you find yourself in the list? Are you in the list anyplace? And so he begins by listing a lot of words. He lists words like evil, greed, and depravity. Can you find those words up there? Evil, I don't know how I define that, but I think evil is just being mean. Just outright mean and uncaring about how you harm anyone else. And it's everywhere. I don't know what prompts a person to get in a vehicle at a Thanksgiving parade and drive that vehicle through a crowd of people, killing several and injuring many, many others, but it sounds evil to me. And greed, it's kind of like idolatry for me. I don't know where you cross that line, because greed is a desire for more. And it becomes an intense desire for more. And we live in a world which says that the more you can get, the happier you're going to be. And so we press for more, and we press for more, and we cut corners to get more, and we do things that are a bit dishonest and unethical to get more, and we keep driving for more and more and more. And where does it cross the line? And God calls it absolutely wrong. It's sin. Depravity just means that you've sunk so low into this world of sin that you can't even recognize it any longer. It's so normal. It's so routine. Everything is bent toward evil. And the question is, as hard as this is, do you find yourself as of yet in the list? And maybe not. Maybe not. And so Paul continues. And he'll say words like envy and murder and strife. And I kind of know what envy is, because it's kind of a cousin to this word jealousy, only it's more intense. And envy is looking at what other people have and what other people have accomplished, and you want it so badly, and you're so feeling badly because you don't have it, and it can cause really bad things to happen to us. Do you know that it was envy that prompted the first murder that we have recorded in history? And do you remember that it was Jesus who was killed because of the word envy? These Jewish leaders they would see how the crowds would go to Jesus and how the crowds would disappear from them. And they became so infuriated with it, and they couldn't stand the phenomena that was happening with Jesus. And they were so full of envy that they destroyed him. Murder. And murder is obvious. Envy and murder, and probably no one here's gone to that level, but sometimes it's just strife. Sometimes it's just strife. And strife is caused when I am so dominant in how I feel about things, and I am so hard and harsh in how my opinions are, and I just keep stirring things up. And some of you may have experienced that in your families, even over the holidays of all times, and you may experience in church settings, and you may experience it at work settings, and it's someone who just keeps pushing or bullying their way and stirring things up, and they're just continual strife. And I guess the question is, can you find yourself in this list? And if you can't, just keep listening, because Paul continues and he says a couple of words like deceit and malice. Deceit means I'm just not quite telling you the truth. It can be just a lie. It can be withholding information. It can be spinning the information to fit what I want it to say. And it's the information that we do to benefit ourselves somehow. Somehow we deceive so that we get benefit. It all comes back to this old word of selfishness. And so there's this deceit and there's this malice. And malice is just having it in your heart, an intent to keep doing evil. You premeditate it, you plan it. It's just part of me, and I'm looking for a way to do evil. And you're probably looking at the list wondering, am I in that list? Do I see myself yet? And then he talks about a couple of other words. Gossip and slander. They also are kind of cousin words, but they're different because gossip is repeating stories. It's just repeating what I've heard. And you and I know about the repeating of stories because the more times it gets repeated, the more inaccurate it becomes, the more embellished it becomes. And I remember some time ago going to a place to get my hair cut. Or one of these places that cuts hair, and it cuts both men's and women's hair. I was sitting in a chair, just got set on a chair, and a woman got into the chair where this lady was going to cut her hair, and the very first words out of her mouth were, well, what are the latest stories? What's the latest news? And guess what happened next? All kinds of stories started being spread, and just one after another after another. And then there's slander. And slander is not just repeating stories. It's me saying something about you so as to kind of discredit you and likely to make myself look a little better. I want to be careful about that one because sometimes you have to tell the truth. And sometimes you have to expose reality. But so often we do it in a slanderous way because we didn't have to do it. And there was no real purpose for it. I just see one of you and I see someone else and I say, did you see what they did or you see what we just slander. We just slander people so easily. Have you found yourself on the list yet? You look all uncomfortable. Are you uncomfortable? I would think everyone would be uncomfortable. It continues. God-hater, insolent, arrogant. God-hater? That's always been a strange term to me. And yet I reflect on that term and I see it's happening everywhere. And so there are people who claim that they do not believe in God. They do not believe God exists. They call themselves atheists. They call themselves agnostic. And they take it upon themselves to fight against God. And so if there's something written with God's name and it's sitting in a public place, they're going to try to persuade government authorities to remove it. And if you're going to pray before some public event, they're going to say you cannot do that. I've told you a story before, but it will, as long as I have my mind, I'll remember it. Because after George W. Bush came out of office and he gave a speech, I sat across from him in front of a huge audience, and I asked him several questions. And I knew what my last question would be. Sir, is there anything we can do for you? And he said, oh, no, there's nothing you can do for me except maybe a new pickup. And had my friend in the audience heard that, he would have given him the new pickup. But I said, well, sir, I'd like to do what we do best at Lubbock Christian University. I'd like to pray for you. And I started praying. And it was like he was in shock. Because I don't suspect that has ever happened, or at least hadn't happened very often in any audience he had been a part of. Because there are so many people who won't let it happen. They will paint images of God or images of Jesus that are derogatory and trying to, they just can't stand. Or, Paul says, they hate God. God-haters. Insolent. Insolent means you're just bent toward rudeness. You are so stubborn and you are so hard in your opinions. If you don't fit my way, you're going to experience my wrath. And it's got to be my way, and it's always my way. And those kind of people are hard to be around. They are bullies. They're just bullies in everything. And arrogant usually goes with the idea of insolent. Arrogant just means that you feel superior and you present yourself as superior. And maybe it's because of your education you feel superior, or maybe it's because you were blessed with beauty, you feel superior, or maybe because you have some unusual talent, you feel superior, or maybe because you have a certain kind of job and title and you feel superior. And to me, it's one of the most ridiculous things that anyone could ever do. Because other people may not have had the advantages that you had growing up. And other people may have made a choice that was a bit wrong somewhere in life and steered them in a different direction. Does that make them less? And some people didn't get the opportunity to go get education. Does that make them less? Does that make me more? God forbid. Arrogance is just wrong. You find yourself in the list any place? Are you there yet? Then he has this one phrase. He says, disobedient to parents. And I don't know why that's there. And I don't know what it means, and I don't know how far it means, because I know that everybody in this audience at some point, sometime, somewhere has been disobedient to parents. I don't think it means just a little bit of disobedience. I think it means rebellion. I think it means you make a serious choice that you're going to abandon what they've said and what they believe and how they teach, and it's just outright rebellion. And it's certainly not honoring parents. And even that is difficult to do as time goes on. But God is intent on every child honoring parents to the best they possibly can. And sometimes it's difficult. I guess the question remains to be, have you found yourself in the list? And now he has three little phrases. No fidelity. That means no faithfulness. Don't keep any promises. And no love. And love is that supreme quality given to all who are calling themselves after Christ. It's the greatest demarcation we have as Christians. People will know us by our love, we are taught. And love is this kindness. And love is this patience. And love is this non-rude life. And it's non-selfish life. And love is the kind of thing that protects people. And love is the kind of thing that forgives, as you prayed for all of us this morning. It's the kind of thing that forgives. And forgiveness is not easy sometimes to muster in our lives, to bring to our lives. But love forgives, but no love in this world of sin. No fidelity, no love, and therefore no mercy. No compassion. No compassion. No compassion that gets so strong in my life that I'm willing to reach out and help people who can't help themselves, or people have made that wrong turn in life, and I can't find it in myself to have this compassionate heart toward them. And all the while God says, this is what I love. I want you to have humility, and I want you to have justice with people, and I want you to have mercy with people, and yet we reach a point in our society where there's no mercy, just cruel judgments. And I guess the question is, do you see yourself anywhere in the list? And sadly, I have to tell you that I'm in that list. In fact, I'm in the list more than once. I'm in the list more than once. And it's only when you understand that there is a list and you're a part of the list that you are going to want the good news story of Jesus Christ. By the way, Paul ends this chapter like this. He says, although people understand, now this is the critical part, although they understand that they're in this list, they don't seem to care. And although they know that God's got a penalty coming for being in the list, they don't seem to care. In fact, not only do not care about themselves, they approve of everybody who else is on the list. They kind of like, they want everybody to be there. And it's really easy to continue to live this life in those ways. It's easy. It's actually natural. And it makes you more like everybody else around you. But the penalty is enormous. And if I can find myself in that list, and I can see this great, wonderful, good news called the gospel, that God says, I know you're on the list. That's really, God is saying, I know you're there. Do you know you're there? I know you're there. And there's not one word on there that's any worse than any other word. Can everybody comprehend that one? There's not one word on there that's any worse than any other word. And so I can jump out and talk about this sexual deviance over here and how bad it is, and I can forget the slander word over here and kind of cover myself over and say, well, you're not that bad, Ken. And yet God says this is the way people live, and it doesn't fit my kingdom. It certainly doesn't fit me. It doesn't fit me for the long haul, certainly. Long haul equals eternity. Everybody got that one? But I've got a deal for you. I've got a deal for you. That's what God is saying. I've got a deal for you. I will cover you with my righteousness. And I'll cover you with my righteousness so that not a single one of these things on the list will even be seen in you by me. I will cover you with my righteousness. If you will start living by faith and you'll start trusting me, I will cover you with my righteousness. How do you get a better deal than that? How do you get a better deal than that? Some of you may find a good deal shopping for Christmas this week. Some of you may be going out and purchasing something you really need for your business. You may find a good deal. Doesn't compare to what God's offering this morning. And we're going to pause and take the Lord's Supper. A time for you to reflect where you are in your life. But here's the good news. A time for us to reflect that God is so intent on giving us the ability to be covered in His righteousness that He came to this earth in the form of His Son. And He was willing to be nailed up to a cross after being beaten nearly to death. And all of that so that you and I could appear before Him snow white. He won't be able to see any of the things that were up on that list. Not a single one. Now, doesn't that make you smile? In a lesson that's been brutally ugly, in a lesson that's been brutally hard and brutally uncomfortable, doesn't that make you smile? Well, smile. Not that Jesus died in the cruelty of it, but that God's been so good.